Quick reality check, brother. When was the last time you actually looked at your life from above? Like mapped it out, your mindset, money, health, relationship, purpose. Not just how it feels, but how it really is. I've got a free tool for you right now. It's called the Wheel of Life, and it's not just some fluff assessment. This shit will show you in black and white where you're thriving and where you're lying to yourself. It takes 2 minutes, it's free, and when you're done, you'll have a crystal clear picture of what's off balance in your life and what to do next. So go hit it now, stan.store/freedude. It's right there. Don't wait until your life crashes to realize your wheel's flat. Get ahead of it, take the test, face the truth, then level the fuck up. All right, back to the episode. But seriously, do the wheel. You'll thank me later. Loren,
Yep.
how you doing?
Doing good. Yeah. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah. So this began with me coming across your Instagram profile. Could you just tell me what you post?
What I
For the
post?
for the audience listening, what do you post mostly on your Instagram feed?
Well, I'd say it's actually quite a wide range of things. And more recently, I've been posting a little bit more about brachiation, the shoulder, kind of swinging movements. And I even added a little tag on my Instagram, ape shoulders, because of my unique intersection to the shoulder specifically. But in general, I post kind of a wide range of things relating to physical practice and the integration of life around physical practice more than just kind of like nuanced fitness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And could you share your story from where you began and how you developed your own movement practice and what's your philosophy today? So, could you share that?
Yeah, I don't want to go too in depth on that because I actually did a 2-hour podcast pretty recently with the Barefoot Sprinter, just talking about my kind of journey. But I can definitely
right.
kind of do the elevator
The
pitch.
highlights.
Yeah. It started with growing up on a standard American diet, not having much physical capacity, but growing up in the 90s and still being very motivated by all of the media that I watched. So if that makes sense. So watching Jackie Chan, all these fitness people, or I shouldn't say fitness people, but action-oriented characters on screen that motivated me to want to be like them in the real world. And that's what I feel like where media used to be, where it was inspiring rather than purely consumptive, which is kind of what I'm seeing now with the youth and adults for that matter. But so it inspired me, but I didn't have the capacity. And in high school, I found parkour on the internet, and that gave me kind of permission that I didn't need to continue pursuing something like this as an adult, and like seeing, okay, there are adults that are pushing this and doing amazing things with their body and having levels of freedom outside of just cinema. And so that led me down the rabbit hole of figuring out nutrition, how to actually change my lifestyle to give myself the capacity that I didn't have when I was younger. And so switching my diet over, I was able to run a lot more and have the physical capacity to keep up with that. And so that's really what started me down this journey. And then growing up in the middle of nowhere in Eastern Washington in a small college town, I didn't really have the peer group that would have kept me going on this path. And so I bought a one-way ticket when I graduated high school, went to Europe to actually train with people that were doing this all the time. And so I saw people on YouTube doing it, went, made those my actual friends, and then started training with them. So that's kind of what got me into it. And then it's been a series of finding the best mentors, working with Coach Summers, working with people at the university that I studied kinesiology and nutrition more classically, and then working with different fitness groups and traveling and training just to kind of amass and put together what I feel like was the best foundation to reverse engineer physical practice for people. And ultimately, that history of finding physical freedom for myself with parkour led me to want to help others find that for themselves in their own lives, not for parkour specifically, which is what I found a lot of my peers and friends did, was they would go and open up a parkour gym and they still kind of just thought in that same lane of like, okay, I love parkour, I want to teach people parkour. And for the most part, it led to people teaching kids parkour. Whereas I wanted to kind of continue aspiring adults to do things as adults and bridging that gap. And so for me, it became a lot more about becoming a movement specialist and understanding human movement, which I think it's worth mentioning. A lot of people kind of confuse like natural movement and even now human movement with just like primal patterns and things where it's very almost campy or cosplay like, where you're just doing things in nature versus taking like a bigger context of the modern human that does have urban environments, professional environments, and natural environments. And how do we kind of transcend the idea of just acting like a caveman or just acting like a monkey, and then being like, okay, I actually want to be a fit physical human in the modern world that leverages modern modalities and then also respects where we came from as humans, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
all that to say, my passion over the past decade has really been collecting the best information and reverse engineering what it takes to take a domesticated modern human and kind of re-inject some of that vigor from our common ancestor, which is where Human Wild came from as a brand. Is I believe that we all have a shared common ancestry of the most robust genetic code, and we can't even fathom how adaptable and how much of a generalist apex predator that we were on this planet to conquer every single environment geographically, and to make it to where we are now, to make all of these advancements that have ultimately kind of led to our demise in some ways. But I don't know if that answers your question. Kind of an arc.
Yeah, but I'm with you, and I love that elongated elevator pitch. And I got stuck at Jackie Chan because I think Jackie Chan is one of the greatest mover I've ever seen. So, what's your favorite Jackie Chan movie?
Oh man,
there are so many, and he's like a machine when it comes to producing movies. But you gotta have you can just pick one.
Yeah, there are so many that stood up for so many different reasons, but the one that I'm just kind of seeing in my mind right now is Rumble in the Bronx.
Oh, okay, that's my top 3.
Yeah, it's a good mix of one of his good ones and then also one that's pretty well known. And there's a specific jump that he had where he does his jump. There's 2 buildings in New York or in the Bronx in New York, and he's running off the top of one roof in through the window. And like missing the fire escape, and he actually broke his foot in that jump in real life.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and they put like a little spandex fake shoe over his cast so he could keep acting and doing some of the things.
I've seen that. Like, he's a true beast, Jackie Chan.
Yeah, and he was a good balance of like really pushing things and hurting himself in the process, but still having a lot of longevity. And I feel like, and that's just a testament to most people never are going to push themselves even like a fraction of as much as Jackie Chan did. And they still wind up not having the longevity and physicality that he did. And so with the right approach, and kind of like where I like to take people is, it doesn't take much, but it takes consistently understanding what you need to work on to have that kind of physical longevity. But it's amazing that he is where he is despite all of the falls and bumps and bruises and things that he's taken.
Yeah, and I've seen like some of his recent movies when he's like up there in age doing like amazing things, which I can't do, and I should have. Like, of course, I don't train, I don't put in the hours as Jackie Chan. I'm not trying to be like Jackie Chan, but it's just, he's just a freak, just a beast. Well, so I want to dive into how you help people and what do you help them with. You mentioned like domesticated people. We are all like a lot more domesticated than we are wild, is one of my beliefs. So how do you work with people, and what are one of their greatest aha moments after starting to work with you?
Yeah, I think I'll break that into two questions.
Yes.
I think one, almost kind of defining what I mean by domesticated at this point, because I feel like
Mm.
that, like zoo humans tossed around, domesticated's tossed around. But when I say that in regards to people, really what I mean is that we have largely, and again, these are generalizations and there are people on all ends of the spectrum,
Of course.
but we have largely forgot how to birth, live, and die with any measure of grace and biological normalcy. And we don't necessarily need to go down all of those tangents. We can, but I think that's just kind of where we are. We're confused. We don't know what to eat. We don't know what to sleep. We don't know values. We don't know how to identify or not identify with things appropriately to kind of have that arc of being born, living, and dying. And we've kind of bastardized a lot of those phases of life. And so like, I'll dive into the second part of the question is how do I actually help people? And before I answer that, I think I like to share this notion that the physical is where I like to meet people. Like that is, I mean, ultimately, metaphorically and literally, that's where we meet people. But I like to meet people where they are in their physical journey and start there. But then it really branches out to the integration of life, which goes back to birth, life, and death and everything in between, because that's really where my passion lies as a husband and father, is truly being an integrated human. But I recognize that the physical and being fit allows me so much more out of life. And it used to be a necessity, kind of going back to pre-domestication, to procure safety, means, food, all of these things. We actually needed our physicality to where now we can opt out of so much, all the way to the point where we can opt out of walking. Like we're getting there, and opting out of thinking for ourselves with ChatGPT and AI, and even like putting pen to paper and writing our own resume, doing, so a lot of tangents there. But to the second question of how do I actually help people, I am working over the past 6-7 years. I've been trying to design the most effective means of helping people develop sustainable physical practices remotely. So I used to have a brick and mortar. And like I said, over the past decade, I've done a lot of different ways of intersecting people. But over the past 7 years, my main focus is how to make somebody's physical practice realistic and sustainable. Because the perfect plan undone, kind of cliche, obviously, is as good as a shit plan. Like if you don't do the thing, you don't do the thing, it doesn't matter. Similarly, if you wanted to have a private coach in person every single day that, like told you what to eat and shows you exactly what to do, that would be great, let's say, but that would be wildly expensive and elitist, and like nobody can really afford that. And then you still have to find the time to actually meet with somebody. So for me, the sustainability aspect comes in again in all sort of aspects of the word, where is this something that you can actually do longitudinally, physically, energetically, something you're going to want to do, something that supports the different seasons of your life, whether it's around childbearing years, whether it's around like I have a lot of work to do to grind on my projects. I'm a grad student, like wherever you are in life, your physical practice needs to meet you there, because at the end of that journey or season of your life, you still have your body, but your tissue capacities will reduce to the maintenance that you had during that period, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so many people wait for arrival moments. And again, this transcends, and I feel like the physical practice for me is kind of the proxy for everything else in life. Because if you're waiting for an arrival moment to get married, let's say getting the right amount of money, having the house, having the direction in your life, or similarly with kids, you want everything to be perfect, and there's just like a arrival moment that culture and convention have told you to wait for, then you're probably never going to do it. And I think that there are certain things that you do need to achieve before you do those things, but I think they're often not the things that culture tells us we need to actually have. And that's a kind of a fun thing to go down to. But specifically with physical practice, it's easy for people to get in the mood to train when they have a specific goal. They want a handstand. They want a ring muscle up. They want their first chin up. They want to do 5 reps with 100 pounds around their waist chin ups. You know, like whatever the specific goal is, or if they're training for a sport, it's easy to have that pain point. And I see a lot of coaches lean into that. And I do that. And those things, like I've helped so many people. It's pretty, like I can't even count how many people I've brought to their first chin up, how many people that I've helped with ring muscle ups, handstands. Those things are great. And I think they're important to have aspirational reaches. But the most important part of physical practice is actually the things that nobody talks about, of maintaining joint health, maintaining the capacity to respond to an emergency situation or a fun opportunity. Like if there's a sporting, like if you're at a party, a kid's birthday party, a friend's gathering, and somebody's playing volleyball, there's some sort of game or sport. And as an adult dad, fully established human, you're like, oh, I want to actually go do that and be competitive. I want to start jujitsu. Then you can actually pick those things up, and you don't have the lag time of building the physical capacity. So like if I wanted to start a sport and I'm like, oh, I'm too weak and I don't have the range of motion, I'm going to take 6 months and then I'm going to start it. Or on the flip side, you have a pickup game and you do it anyways, and then you injure yourself. And now you're all laid up, your back hurts, all these different things. So really the part that I think is the most important, and it's not sexy, doesn't sell on Instagram, is like the physical practice, the consistency. Like, what does that look like? What is the most effective 10 minutes that I can have every single day that actually affords me to maintain elastic capacity as I age, different measures of strength, range of motion, joint health. And so I guess that was the really long-handed way of kind of explaining what I do, but I really make it manageable for people to build that physical practice minimally, remotely, and sustainably.
So could you like share an example? How would that look? Someone coming to you, needing help, and how that journey is for them to, do they reach a goal? Do you set the goal together, or like, can you just like share how does that journey look?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I'll jump into that pretty succinctly. I think it's worth mentioning that it makes total sense that is nebulous. And for me, 7 years ago, I can still remember one of my peers. We would sit down and talk about the businesses we were building, and I would talk about, how am I going to deliver this? Like, how is it even possible to do this remotely? And he was working on building biodegradable batteries and things. And so he's talking about that, and I'm talking about this, and I can just so clearly remember those conversations. So yes, when people think about remote coaching and how this would even work, it's like something that is so foreign. And for me, it took a long time to even want to enter the space, to be able to maintain a level of quality where I'm actually delivering on what I want, and not just like 12 weeks to abs or something like that. Yeah. So what it actually looks like is, when somebody starts working with me, I work through an app, and they go through a pretty detailed intake test where there's 18 different tests. 6 of them are strength, 6 of them are range of motion, and 6 of them are skill-based, kind of general skills.
So strength, range of motion, and the third one was skill-based?
Skill, yeah.
Yeah, and what do you mean with, what type of skills do they need, or are they tested for?
Yeah, and so why I like to break it up into these categories is I feel like these are kind of the 3 foundational categories of the physical. Is people mostly understand strength is your ability to exert force, withstand forces exerted on you, and people mostly understand range of motion, even though that one's a little bit less understood because you have kind of passive flexibility, active range of motion, and all that. But when I say range, I just mean the access that your body has, or the range that your body has access to. So the 2 kind of things I bring up there is, if you have access to a bunch of range, but you're not strong there, then you're very vulnerable there. You can go there, but you could get hurt there. Things could happen. If, on the other hand, you're quite strong, but you don't have access to different degrees of range, then you have 0 strength everywhere that you can't go. And then the skill side of things, so those kind of make sense. But the skill side of thing is more kind of internal skill, looking at balance and a little bit of mental confidence and kind of where you are proprioceptively, if that makes sense. So general skills like coordination. I use juggling as one of the proxies, 3-ball juggling. We use some rope flow. We use one of the skill tests that I have, I think needs a little prefacing too, is it's the handstand, but it's not the handstand for the sake of the handstand as a skill. So the way the actual test looks is it's binary. You go to somewhere like an open room or an open grassy area, and you have to kick up to a handstand, and you have to hit 180 degrees, like your feet are fully in the air, but you don't have to stick it. You just have to go all the way over, or you have to come back down. And what that shows me is it shows me that you have the confidence that you are robust enough to attempt something that could be very daunting. You're not going to hurt yourself. You know your own limits, and you have enough wrist and shoulder integrity just to throw it, just to kick it up there. And most adults don't really have that capacity. And so again, it has nothing to do with the balance of the handstand. It's just like, if I, told you, Morgan, can you go out there and kick your legs up in the air and get all the way upside down on your hands? Can you do it? And so a lot of these are task-based tests.
The answer is yes.
Good, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So a lot of these are task-based tests where I get to visually see what and how you approach it. And so it's qualitative. And then we have a data point. And so a lot of it's like, even one of them is there's a standard of, women doing 5 chin-ups and men doing 10 chin-ups. And so when you approach that, it's like, how does it look? What's the quality? What's the symmetry of your pull? What's the speed? What's the height? So there's so many things that go into it where it's like, yeah, these are very simple task-based things to kind of look generally at how well-rounded somebody is and where any glaring holes are. But then qualitatively, I can see what your execution means. So oftentimes there are patterns where I can kind of predict what the next tests, the range of motion tests, are going to look like based on how people move in their strength tests and so on. But yeah, so that's kind of where we start. Is we start with this list of intakes, and then that allows me to paint a picture of what the person needs as a human, in my opinion, against what they want as some of their immediate goals, what's going on in their life. And then we can kind of make the best plan going forward of how to address that with the minimum amount of energetic investment.
Yeah, and this might sound like a little bit of a nerdy question, but in your assessment, do you have like a score for how they are performing for a muscle up, for example, or they are kicking up their legs? Do you have like a score from like 0 to 10 on how good the pull up was or how the kick up was? Like, how do you assess like each
That's
assignment or movement?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've toyed with all sorts of assessments over the years, and like what is going to make the most sense for the most amount of people. And the beauty of this is I've worked with people of all ages, quite young, quite old, in the middle. And with this, and what I've landed on is I wanted to make a test that is simple and binary. It's pass fail. There's no gradient. And there are a lot of other tests that I like, and we can kind of dive into some from the past and in the future. But with this, it's binary. It's, can you meet this? Can you not meet this? So that they have a very simple yes, no answer on each of them.
All right.
But for me, there is a lot of qualitative information that I'm getting. And if somebody, let's say, can do like 3.5 chin-ups quite well, and the goal's 5, then where they are going to start is going to be vastly different, obviously, than somebody that can barely hang on the bar. So it's pass or fail, but there's a huge gradient of like, what does this mean for you once you start training?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Got it. When you work with, I don't know how many people you've coached, but what is the most common aha moment you hear, the feedback you're getting from your clients? What are people most grateful for when they start working with you?
Yeah, I would say kind of across the board over the years, outside of obviously, the elation of achieving a specific goal. I am always amazed at how profound just starting having more consistency in your joint health hygiene and some of the daily minimum pieces that we work on across the board, people saying like, you know, shoulder things are going away, or like, oh, like my neck's feeling better, or I just feel just like kind of generally feeling better in their own body. And to me, like a lot of it, like I have to remember kind of where people are starting and what consistency can do for people. And again, those kind of less sexy elements of training, just feeling better in their body with that consistency of practice. I feel like across the board, that is the one that I get messages all the time where like, I feel like people haven't even done anything or started anything. And I'll get all of these messages that are like, oh, I feel great. Or like, this is kind of gone away. Or like this thing that we didn't even talk about is feeling better. And to me, that just shows how much low hanging fruit there really is to having some intent to what you're doing and then consistently applying it.
Yeah, got you. And I'm curious if you've seen people starting to train and then starting to become more comfortable in their own skin. Because I'm really curious about how men specifically can become more comfortable in their own skin. I was a kid that were super uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable in social situations, started training martial arts, started becoming so much more comfortable in my own skin, started to become so much more comfortable in social situation. It had this crossover effect like over my whole life. Do you see this, or do you have like any other idea of specifically if a man have that feeling of being uncomfortable and becoming comfortable? How would that journey look like?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there are a couple shades of things. There are things that are sacrificed with the remote delivery of physical practice. And then there are things that are just true to it that you can't decouple. And most of the work that I choose to do now is kind of really largely the unsung heroes of physical practice, like we're talking about, where like I don't get to see a lot of the benefit in visually or like in being expressed as I did when I had a physical gym or when I work with people more with parkour and movement stuff. The things that I like to help people with allow them to do all the things that you're talking about. And so obviously we do have a lot of like we still chase goals like ring muscle up and handstands and jumping and vaulting and things that do build a lot of confidence. But to speak directly to that, the moments that I think really foster that I have seen, and kind of tying it back into parkour, and is when somebody has a physical challenge in front of them, and we'll just use a jump because it's kind of the easiest one to look at. Somebody has a jump in front of them. Let's say they're standing on a 3-foot wall and they're trying to jump to another 3-foot wall, and there's a gap between them, hard concrete edges. And in their mind, on paper, they know that they can make this jump. They've tried to do it on flat ground. They've made it every single time. They've worked up to it. They know in their heart that they can make it. But there's this analytical side of their brain that is like, well, if I don't, now there's consequence. Now it's painful. Now it's going to hurt. And I'm scared. And so they're just kind of battling in their own mind with like, I know I can do it, but, you know, and there's that kind of thing holding them back. And then when they do it, they've broken that jump mentally. They do the jump, they feel amazing. And there's just this huge cascade and flood of, you know, hormones and feelings around doing something that you thought you couldn't, but you kind of knew you could. And then it elevates your sense of confidence and self. And so I've witnessed that in myself a lot. And the neat thing about that in particular is it's such a common sensation that is reproducible to the point when you have a group of people that most of them have experienced that. And then they see somebody in the group literally going through those steps before them. They can empathize on a level that is so profound that they are there with that person doing that thing. And then when the person breaks the jump for them, they almost get like referred dopamine. Like they're getting a lot of that benefit that the person that's going through that is getting. And I guess kind of long way around to what you're saying is I've witnessed this across the board with fighters, with people in all different physical disciplines, where once they really know where they start and end and where their abilities are, and they don't have an inflated sense of self, and they have that physical relationship, I think it affords not only self-confidence, but also a type of physical empathy that allows them to negotiate their world and their relationships on a more confident, real level that isn't, yeah, I don't know if you kind of know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, but I really thought that physical empathy was a really interesting take. Could you unpack that?
Yeah, it's
I
guess,
got a sense of what
yeah,
you're saying, but I would love to hear your thoughts around that.
yeah, it's almost like I guess I'll take it in a different direction, and then you can see if you want to steer me back to the physical empathy a little bit more.
Yeah.
With parkour in particular, something that I've found a lot, and I'm sure that there are lesser degrees of this, but when I would be out training, balancing on something up high, doing something quote, scary, I get a lot of people that would first obviously call the cops, but second, they would come out and they would say like, like, you're going to hurt yourself, get down. And they're projecting their fears onto you. They're putting themselves into your situation and saying, if I was there, I would get hurt. Therefore, they're going to get hurt. And so that's almost like the antithesis of having that physical empathy, because their physical abilities are so beneath what you're doing. They can't imagine that being safe for anyone. And they're projecting their fears onto you. And so I received that a lot. And then by way of me developing my physical abilities and tackling my fears and working through all of those things that initially made it hard for me to be up high and do those things, but then putting in, well over 10,000 hours and feeling perfectly confident, never hurting myself in any of those situations. As a coach, it's allowed me to have this level of physical empathy, to meet people where they are, to understand people's physical abilities almost better than they do, and often better than they do, before they actually build that relationship with self. And it's allowed people to trust me on a level that, they look to me to be kind of their like cricket, conscience, in like Pinocchio style conscience, while they're building it for themselves. And so I would say it's not so much something that I do with the remote work, but I do still do live retreats, and I still do train people in person. But I feel like that is a very special aspect that is more reserved for the emotional and energetic exchange of in-person work. And that's also, like maybe why in-person work is so much more expensive, but you're sharing that time. But that is a beautiful side of it, where there is so much unspoken exchange. And so, yeah, the physical empathy thing, I think that as you achieve a deeper intrapersonal relationship with yourself that is fostered through physical practice, it allows you to really physically understand, or mentally understand, where people are in their physical space and how comfortable they are in their skin, which kind of comes full circle back to you saying that, like, before you built these things up and when you were younger, you kind of didn't feel very secure in your own skin. And I think that is, it's like if you were to put on an article of clothing that didn't fit very well, it doesn't feel good and you don't feel confident in it. But if it fit well, that's kind of like you learning to use your body, to have balance, to trust your grip. And then when it fits well, you wear it well, you have better posture, you change the way that you interact with the world, and you feel different and people perceive you differently. So.
Yeah, totally get that. And you made me think about my mother-in-law. So, because I let my kids just like hang on things, climb there, and my wife as well. Like, my physical capacity is like, if we said on a level from 0 to 10, maybe I'm at a 8, and they're maybe at a 2 compared to where I am.
Your mother-in-law or the kids?
No, my mother-in-law. So they are like, so they get like this anxiousness when but I know my kids so well.
Yep.
I play with them in a totally different way.
Mhm.
And they just like come in and visit from the outside and
Yep.
see what's going on. And they're like, okay, we should almost call the social security on your
Yeah.
ass.
Well, I think that's a perfect.
And I know you got kids. So have you experienced this? Or
Yeah. I think that's a perfect, just to kind of come back, I think that's a perfect way of explaining it. So their physical level is 2, yours is like 8 or 9. And when they come in, anything that like bumps above a 2 is just like blackout gray area.
Yeah.
There's
They
no
can't
control there. They don't know
understand
what's going on there.
What's going on? Yeah.
And it just all looks
right.
scary and dangerous. And that's totally not the case, obviously. And so specifically with children, and I'm actually working on making a little free resource called Raising Heroes. It's a primer on my Instagram that people can get, and I'm going to drop it on July 1st. But
All
the
right.
one
Can
of
we
the
get
things,
that in the show notes?
yeah, we can put that stuff in there,
Awesome.
and I can
Cool.
mention kind of things at the end that I've got
Awesome.
projects I'm working on. But
Awesome.
that one there is in order to facilitate opportunity for your children and to foster their physical development through play, not training. I don't advocate for training babies and children at all. It's play, it's exploration, and that's partly how you achieve a very high level as an adult in parkour or jiu-jitsu or any of those things, is play and like actually doing it out of enjoyment rather than sets and reps. But in regard to children specifically, you can't be that facilitator or a role model if you don't have the abilities yourself. And as you are facilitating opportunity for your children, it's a two-way street. They're learning, you're learning. You're learning about yourself, they're learning about themselves, and you're learning about each other, most importantly. And so, like you said, you've built a relationship with your children, and you know what their facial expressions look like. You know what their abilities are. You know you can push them a little bit farther than they're comfortable with. And that is where, like, that's parenting to me. And that's coaching to me, is you know your client or your child's ability a little bit better than they do, and you're facilitating positive growth in a safe way. So,
So happy to hear that, and that you're sharing that on the podcast as well. And what are your non-negotiable as a father for your kids?
Yeah, I think.
So you mentioned play, not training. That's one thing. And do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think that question could go in a lot of different ways. And I just recently had 2 things that kind of play into that as well. I heard there was an audio, a sculptor was voicing over a reel. He was making a sculpture of him and his child, him holding his child. And he was narrating over the top and saying something to the effect that, there's no amount of money that I would trade for my child, and that most decent parents would say something to that effect. But what does that actually mean? If there's no amount of wealth or money in the world that you would trade for any one of your children, then that means that your children are more valuable than every bit of wealth in the world. And that means that you have something that is more valuable than all the wealth in the world. So you are in part the wealthiest person in the world to have your children. And so kind of going down that vein, a lot of people don't actually spend the time. They would say something to that effect, but they wouldn't. They end up not spending as much time or presence with their children as I think that they should. So for me, a lot of the non-negotiables are being wildly present with my child. And affording what I believe my child needs energetically and nutritionally, and kind of those spaces where my wife and I have gone to great lengths to prepare nutritionally before conception, 7 years before even conceiving the child, while the baby's in utero, postpartum, nourishment, and from a literal standpoint, and then also from an energetic standpoint, and doing a lot of personal work emotionally for ourselves as well as physical work for ourselves in preparation for that.
Can I ask you what inspired you to go down that route? Because we have like a similar take on what we did before conception.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever really spent too much time on the like where and what got me to want to do that. To me, it's always been kind of a no-brainer to always do everything within my power for the best outcome in anything that I do. And like we can reduce that to one topic to make it easier to understand, but for myself when it comes to like nutrition, um why wouldn't I eat the best, do the best, make the best choices, because there is so much that is always outside of my control. And if you know that there is so much out of your control, but there is parts that are inside your control, to me, it just makes sense to do everything in my power that I can. And also, I want to attack on there, like not being dogmatic with myself or with other people, because we're all on a journey and we're all learning what better is towards best. But again, a perfect plan undone is not a good plan. So it's like, what is realistic, what is sustainable, but moving towards doing everything that we can. So back in it specifically to nutritionally preparing for children, you could say that we're nutritionally preparing for children, but at the same time, we're just doing the best for ourselves. And then for myself, I'm doing the best so I can be the best husband. And then I have in my mind that I am going to want to be a father. So I'm also doing it for that. And then I'm also going to want to be a grandfather. So in taking care of myself, then I'm taking care of that. And so there's an integration that comes into the decisions of being the best version of yourself, that have far-reaching consequence. And so I think that it might sound kind of over the top when you take it for one specific reason, but as you apply it broadly, I think that everything kind of ties back into itself, and it becomes less auxiliary pieces and tasks and things you need to optimize and biohack and do. But once you kind of come back to the root of why you do anything, I think it makes it much easier to do things sustainably and to do things at the best of your ability, because you have your whys figured out and everything is working towards the same goal ultimately.
And am I right hearing that one of your motivations is to have grandchildren? Because I have that as well. Not only to have grandchildren, but to kick my grandchildren's ass in sports.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had a grandfather that he died when he was 82, but he was ripped, he was fit, and he won like cross country skiing competitions where you also shoot. I don't know
Yep.
what was it called
Mm-hmm.
here in Sweden. When he was 79 and then died at 82, he winded up in the hospital and he had some tubes up his nose and
Mm-hmm.
things up his arm. I was like, I don't want to go down like that. And he just like ripped everything out from his body and just like died on his own terms.
Yeah.
So that has really motivated me to not become like my father, that was like really unhealthy, really
Mm-hmm.
sick, damage in his body, worked as a police officer his whole life, but also like didn't have like the best nutrition, smoked a lot and stuff like that. And I could see his health decline a lot. We were like prepared as young kids that father might pass away due to his lack of health.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, hearing about our grandfather that was this stud, he was fit, he was physically capable, like up until old age. So it was like this perfect storm of the carrot and the stick stories.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to share, what is your motivation for continuously like growing, develop. It's not only the physical aspects. If it sounds like it's the emotional aspects, how to raise a family, and so much more.
Yeah, I think a lot of the way that I live life is an act of spirituality for me. Like the integration of being part of our food, being part of, the raising of our children, being very in the driver's seat of a lot of part of our lives and integrating it. And it also, I think this is partly where people lose a lot of sense of identity, and we've stripped the valuable aspects of our life from them, from like the things that we buy and the clothes that we have. If there isn't any meaning in those, then they kind of just, they lack value, and then we can start to lack identity. For me, Yeah, I guess there isn't like a one-liner of why. It's like, why not? I think is it better for me. It's like if I'm here to live life fully and to enjoy moments and be more present, like there's a saying that, life isn't just about fitness, but everything in life is harder if you're not fit. And I think that by being presented with so many different comforts and shortcuts to information and things, and it ends up making life harder. Like it's a false choice that we can just opt out of these things and not have consequences. So for me, yeah, I guess I don't really have a great answer other than it just seems so obvious to me. Like,
Yeah.
and it's a reward feedback loop, because as you have these things and as you have the beauty of, a wonderful wife, wonderful children, and, wonderful food and all of these things that you have worked hard for, I just can't really imagine doing it any other way or projecting any other future, and can't help but think about the grandchildren and those things. And it's amazing that your grandfather, outside of the amazing things that he did in his life, he instilled that, being a role model for you. And now you're going to pass that to your children, and then you're going to be a grandfather to somebody, and you're going to keep that going. So there's this like legacy to it too, where you're, yeah, passing on that vitality.
Yeah. And then did we touch on the non-negotiables as a parent?
Yeah, I guess I would have to break it into categories or something, or have a little bit more direction. From a
Yeah.
purely physical standpoint, I think that there are some really awesome, like I think, like if we were to just break it up into sports that I think kids should do. I don't think specializing as children is really great, but I think that like if I was to make a recipe for a great physical cocktail, I would say that the basics of gymnastics, not the sport competition side of it, but the basic tumbling, proprioceptive play in gymnastics, and the basics of wrestling, I think are two really great kind of physical outlets for young children, just because of the generalist ability that it builds. But then with my kid in particular, I don't have the desire or plan to really push him into sports. And again, it kind of comes back to my philosophy of being a generalist in your ability. So I offer a lot of opportunity for him to balance, for him to climb, and that is, translates directly from crawling. You have your kind of contralateral patterns, and then knowing where your feet are and your hands are to climb. And often, kids are climbing long before they're walking well, and running well. And so I think that, that plays a big part. And then outside of what people mostly think of when they think of physical skills, and I notice this on Instagram too, where you get these like kind of cheap windows into other people's lives and you know nothing about them. But one thing that I will see is young children or babies doing pretty miraculous, amazing physical things that happen to be what their parents do. Like, let's say their parent is a skateboarder, and then their kid's doing some crazy skateboarding, or their parent happens to be a motocross and their child is like riding a dirt bike. But
I never understood how that is possible.
Yeah, but you see that, but then but at the same time, that child is still in a diaper.
Yeah.
So to me, like when I think about physical development for my child, you can't separate the mental and the physical growth, because they are in tandem, and the physical informs the mental development. And along that way, you have language, and you have, physical continence and their ability to control their pelvic floor and to go to the bathroom in the right place. And so in the resource that we can link in the show notes, Raising Humans, I do a little head nod and point to Elimination Communication, which is basically just starting your child out.
Yeah, could you just share what Elimination Communication is? It's also called like baby potting here in Sweden.
Okay, yeah, and
not so many people know about it.
Yeah, a lot of different parts of the world still do this, and it's just normal practice. And most cultures had some form of this before, corporations came up with disposable diapers. Because if you have your baby in cloth diapers, cloth, wool, cotton diapers, which is what we used, those aren't made for babies to actually soil them intentionally or to sit in them. They're preventative, that if they miss something, they can catch peas in that. It's a very absorbent wool. It's great, but it's not made for pooping in and sitting in and all of that. So you are incentivized to pay attention to your child, notice at what points or junctions in their day might they need to go to the bathroom, and offering them opportunities and basically getting them in touch with how their body works and knowing how and when to signal that they need to go to the bathroom or go to the bathroom themselves. So you're essentially building a deep relationship with your child from day one and empowering them to learn to use a potty from day one. And it's not about perfection. And there are, depending on people's lives, they can implement this to varying degrees. Yeah. It's not all or nothing. But it's having, again, that vision and destination in mind where, like, I want to empower my child to be capable and in control of themselves in this way. And there are all sorts of issues that do come from teaching a child to defecate on themselves. And again, this is, no shame on parents that don't know about this, that do things conventionally, whatever. Again, like, I really stress not being dogmatic or not being like, judgmental of people and where they are, and meeting people where they are. And that goes for myself, and that goes for my parents. I can go through and talk about all the things that my parents didn't know, that did in a way that I would have preferred differently. But ultimately that leads us to who we are, and we can try and do better. And I think that maybe that answers your question of what is it in me that wants to do better? And I think it's that. It's like, coming from something that could have been better, and then knowing it. And then it's like, why wouldn't I do better? And then kind of trying to instill that in the next generation too. And then, imagine the world we could have if everybody had that mentality, and it wasn't chasing money and progress. It was chasing, a beautiful, optimal space for developing human experience. But
yeah, and this takes us on a great segue into like goal setting. Do you use goal setting or not? For example, I could just like share what I do. I have no goals, but I hear people saying that I need to have a race coming up in order for me to go out and run. But I just put up like Olympic rings. I have a wall to climb on. I have kettlebells all over the floor. I just like have things to do whenever I'm going to the car, or I'm going out to the lawn, so I just have things to do. That is how I'm keeping myself like fit and strong these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I also experience issues. I'm not as fit and like functional and pain free as you are, but I'm in a good spot when I compare to all the Homer Simpsons and domesticated animals that we live amongst.
Yeah,
no judgment here.
Yeah, and I would say that having those goals wouldn't eliminate the issues that you just mentioned.
All right.
You see what I'm saying? Like having a race.
Yeah, please expand on that.
So you just kind of described that you have built your environment to facilitate movement in a way that feels good to you and allows you to stay active, healthy, fit, etc. But you still experience, some aches and pains and different things, and we all do to different degrees. And some of that is avoidable. Some of that is just a consequence of living, as we're all destined for death, and there are different sacrifices that we make based on our life choices and the things and goals that we have. But by injecting, let's say I have a race in a month that I'm working towards, that isn't inherently going to get rid of the issues of the aches and pains and things that you were talking about. In order to do that, you need to figure out what your weak links are through some sort of, again, assessment or deep reflection, self-audit, getting a coach, something like that, to really figure out, okay, what are the issues? How much of them can I progress? But just to the motivation question, and like, do I set goals for myself? Do I set goals for my clients? Do I encourage my clients to set goals for themselves? There are all different types of motivation. And one of my mentors had an article that he wrote about the different types of motivation and kind of the sustainability of each of them. And there's an idea that you should be able to leverage different ones at different points in our lives. Like when we hit an all-time low, like pain is a motivator. There are
Yeah,
all
for
these
sure.
but there are cheaper motivators. There are ones that are more fleeting. It's like once you get the pain to go away, I'm good now. I don't actually need motivation now. So and then you have like jealousy and envy, and then like all these different things. Ultimately, I think having like a deep sense of self-motivation for things like your wife, your kids, your community, the grandfather you can be, and just like having a zeal for life, I think is ultimately where you should be. But that doesn't necessarily inherently mean you're not going to have issues if you don't know what your issues are and you don't address them. But it's great because you're motivated and you're curious, and you're probably going to seek the answers because you are motivated, outside of like the initial like, oh, my shoulder hurts, so I need to go fix that, and then now I don't need to do anything anymore because it's a little bit better. But to the question of, do I set goals and do I encourage my clients to set goals? I think that it comes and goes. For me, I have spent so much time in the trenches chasing specific goals, getting injured, fixing those injuries, and all of that journey has led me to this level of physical empathy as a coach that I can understand when somebody really wants a goal. I can understand when somebody doesn't have a goal. I can understand what this injury looks like, having this capability, not having this capability is, and it puts me in a position to kind of bridge the gaps with the individual person. And there's a time and place for setting goals, and there's a time and place for not setting goals. And so I guess it comes back to the answer of it depends, which kind of is like a crappy answer, but it really does. It depends on the person, the season of life they're in. And goals can absolutely be powerful. And I guess the last thing I'll add to that is there is always some sense of a goal, I feel like, with the coaching that I do, even if it's not like a main destination. It's like, okay, your hamstrings are wildly tight. If you don't improve them, they will inevitably get worse, and they will lead to downstream effects in your motor patterns, your balance, pain, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, this is kind of a tertiary goal that we will be working on, and we'll check in on it and see how it's improving. But it's not like in 3 months, this is going to be perfect. So it's like kind of triaging goals as well as having acute ones. Yeah.
After this interview, I will step outside and start stretching my hamstrings back. I've been playing soccer with my oldest son for like 2 hours. I'm really tight right now. And on that note, what is true and not true about stretching? There's so many things it's like so much information about stretching out there that I've just like left it. I don't even do it. So I just want some clarity in it. Should I stretch? Should I not? How do I stretch?
Okay, well, you're opening a bunch of questions, but let's start with it. Let's give something super actionable for people.
Let's have something actionable. I would love that.
But let's give something. Let me just give the test, like very actionable. Like after this podcast, you're going to go lay on your back and try this, and everybody else should do this maybe while they're listening to it. So you lay on your back, your legs are perfectly straight, and you flex both your quads so your legs stay straight. So no bend in the knee, and you raise one leg up, and you see if you can get your ankle to stack directly over your hips. So you're making 90 degrees at your legs, at your groin, and both legs are straight. So that's a great standard and goal, one that I use for basic true hamstring range of motion. If you sit in a pike and you reach for your toes, now we're introducing spinal flexion. There's a whole bunch of other things where some people might be able to touch their toes easy and they still have tight hamstrings because they have a lot of range to their shoulders and their back. So this test, very simple. Lay on your back, completely straight, both legs straight, raise one leg. Can you bring it all the way to 90 degrees or over? Other leg, same thing. And I think that the 90 degrees is a wildly reasonable standard for everyone, and that everyone can benefit from achieving that.
And if I can't get it 90 degrees, if it's like I'm laying like this and I can't go 90 degrees like this, I'm just like coming up like that, what should I do? Is it issues with my hamstring? Should I stretch, or what do I do with that?
I would advise starting to work on it. And then working on it, there's going to be a lot of different ways to work on it. Some more passive, and there is a place for passive stretching to kind of reset and work with your nervous system and your relationship of safety in a space. And then there is a reason for working actively and activating your muscles regressively and progressively into that space. And to come back to, like, you know, do I stretch? Do I not stretch? And all of these things with any capacities, when you build the capacity for the first time, whether it's a range of motion or it's strength, the approach is going to be longer and have more layers and more effort and time devoted to it to achieve it. Whether or not it's strictly a mental limitation and you're working through that, whether it's purely physical and you need more strength, whether your nervous system doesn't feel safe and won't release certain ranges of motion, it will take time to build them. And there are strategies to do that. But once you have those expressions of strength, range, or skill, the ability to maintain them is so much easier. Specifically for range of motion, I have everybody that I work with work towards confidence and strength in active front splits. So what that means for people that are just listening is, think about a really long lunge where your front foot and back foot are as far apart as you can move them, and you're still standing actively on your feet. So imagine if you're hiking and you span between two boulders, like you're stretching, catching your weight, and it's active. I think working towards as deep or as long of a lunge as you can actively is far more beneficial than trying to achieve passive front splits. Most people will never need passive front splits. It won't serve them unless you're specializing or doing some activities that require that kind of excessive range of motion. I think having a nearly front split lunge is far more powerful for a couple of reasons. One, because obviously at this point you have the strength to maintain that range when you're there. So it's safe, it's usable. But two, if you just lunge in that way and hold it isometrically, do a few drills in that space, you will maintain the strength and the range of that without a bunch of auxiliary stretching. So at this point, it's just like you're just lunging. You can go out and do some lunges, do some like kind of hitting that range of motion. And if you use the range that you want in your day-to-day, once you've achieved it and you have the tissue capacity to support it without injury, maintenance is really not very hard.
All right. So what should I do? Not stretch, or should I just like do movements like animal-based movements or locomotion or like to get that hamstring both like not so tight, but also like keep the strength in like those positions?
Yeah. Well, I tend to stray away from giving specific like recipes and things because, you know, there's a lot that can go into it, but I will try and explain. And it's also hard to explain specific exercises just, you know, in a conversation. But one that if you're somebody, you're listening to that, you laid on your back and you're really tight, you can't get your leg up that high. One thing that's very accessible and easy that you can do on a daily basis to good effect is if you find a wall in your home, like a doorway, that you can lay on your back through the doorway. So your waist is at the door position and your upper body is in one room, your lower body's in the other room. And then you shift yourself to the left to where you actually butt up against the door frame, and you put one leg up the wall and one leg through the doorway. And then you can scoot away from the door jamb just enough to where you're at, let's say you're less than 90-degree angle. So one leg is resting up against the wall, the other leg is through the door. From that position, just having socks on, you can slide your heel up and down the wall. So you're bending that leg super easy, you're straightening it, it gets a little bit tighter in the hamstrings. You're just starting to kind of get that motion. As you're sliding up and down, every couple slides, scoot your hips a little bit closer to the wall. As they get closer to the wall, you're getting closer and closer to forcing that 90-degree position.
Yeah.
Once you get to a place where it's like kind of tight, Then you can start doing some regressive and progressive contractions. So once you've kind of loosened things up, you're as close as you feel comfortable with your hips to the wall, you can lock both your legs straight, and then you can push your heel into the wall of the upright leg for about 10 seconds. You can ramp up to really good pressure, and then you can try and lift that leg off the wall towards your body. Even if it doesn't come off the wall, it's going to come off lighter. It's like you're not going to be resting against the wall as much, and pull 10 seconds against yourself. And so you can work both directions there. You can even work your leg up to a really good angle and hold it passively for a while. But exploring the glides up and down the wall, the passive hold on the wall, and then the active pushing and pulling of your leg up the wall, if you did that for 5 minutes a day, you'd probably see pretty good results.
Yeah, cool. And do you see people even mentioned joint health? You mentioned it in the beginning of the podcast. So
Yeah.
Is this something that people are thinking about, and how important is it? And is this something that I improve when I'm doing CARs, controlled activated rotations?
Yep. Controlled articular rotations. Yep.
Controlled articular rotations. What did
Yep.
I say?
Active.
Something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I, like I said at the beginning of this, when I went on my journey to kind of figure out the best ways for people to build this practice, I dove into a lot of different modalities. One of them, FRC, what you're mentioning, Dr. Andrea Spina, who's kind of come up with controlled articular rotations, and now they're pretty mainstream. The idea with a controlled articular rotation, or CARs, is to isolate and explore one joint's fullest range of motion. And then you can start to, it's like a little mini assessment for yourself. How does this joint feel? Is there areas of the joint that hurt? Are there parts that don't feel safe? Is my range of motion just garbage in this joint? And so kind of the idea with that assessment is twofold, where one, you get a good idea of whether or not that joint's working well today. You get an idea of where that joint is, like just as a joint, like as a whole. Maybe it's different today, but this is just where it is in general. And so in doing CARs, you can start to nourish the joint, because joints are avascular. And so how they actually receive most of their nourishment is by pushing the synovial fluid around in the joint. And you do that by moving the joint. Why a CAR might be a better choice than just doing general movements or joint circles is often when you're just kind of flowing through a motion, you might neglect the joint that is having the issue, and facilitate the movement with the joint above or below that joint.
Makes sense.
With the shoulder in particular, if somebody's doing a big arm circle, they might move their spine in flexion, extension, lateral movement to make it seem like their shoulder's moving well. But if you really anchor your spine and now you move your shoulder, the range will be smaller, but it will be truer to the shoulder. Mm-hmm. So when I work with people, I don't go too deep into FR stuff, but I do teach people how to kind of go head to toe through CARs, how to leverage them on a daily basis minimally, to be informed of how they're feeling, and to also nourish their joints and to expand on their ranges of motion a little bit. Kind of like I was saying, like if you go through a window of time or a season in your life where you have very little time to devote to anything physical, because you're just so busy with new babies, with work, whatever it is, and we all have those moments, like there is a 10-minute routine that I work people through that I feel like is wildly powerful, that involves, like I mentioned, some of the rope flow for kind of full body coordination and like waking up the spine and nourishing the spine, and then CARs for kind of going through all of your joints, and then some different very regressive and progressive plyometrics. And like within something very small like that, in 5 to 10 minutes, you can really inform your tissues and maintain a lot of capacity and nourish your body in a very helpful way that will preserve tissue capacity going forward.
Did you say, do you have a video on this? Like as a guided video session?
I have over 1,000 demo videos filmed.
All right, cool.
So like, and this is what, like when I'm working with people, like everything is a video. Like there isn't
All right.
anything. Yeah. So I mean, I have everything that I do filmed.
Yeah, because cars is something I always just like type out on YouTube, and I
Yeah.
have this program with Breathe and Flow that I
Yeah.
follow along. I got like a lot of help from cars,
Yeah.
especially with the neck and shoulders. What I struggle with cars is my hips.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm like not feeling or not. I don't feel that I'm doing it right. I had a coach looking at me, but he lives like in Oslo, one of my best friends,
Mhm.
and he's like, "Your hips is something you need to work with."
Yeah. And I'll say a couple things to
I
that.
feel I can't isolate
Yeah.
like the hip joint. I feel that I'm what do you say, like that I'm compensating
Yep.
when I'm
Yep.
doing that movement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of these cars are wildly not gratifying. Like,
What do you mean? Like
like,
the cars on YouTube?
or no, just saying like
No.
you trying to do a hip car is not
Yeah.
going to feel like you're doing much. Like it's going to kind of suck, and it's going to be like, wow, I can't really move this a lot. And when you
Yeah.
see, when cars kind of first entered, you would see somebody holding a PVC pipe and trying to stand on one leg and do the hip car with their free leg, and you would see people like basically like stepping over a high fence. But they would be
Yeah.
like spinally, like using a ton to get really high step. Where if you truly isolate your hip in that motion with external rotation, bringing it around, internal rotation, bringing it behind you, it's a very small motion. Like, I've got friends that go really deep into FR and their coaches specifically for that. And like, it's not very impressive is I guess what I mean. It's not very gratifying.
Yeah,
Where it's like,
got you.
but like you said, there is a lot of nuance to it. And when I film my demos, I don't use stock demos, and that's why I've filmed like over 1,000 demos. And I'm kind of like, it's probably hindered me in the short run, helped me in the long run, because I'm kind of a perfectionist with the work that I do. But with the car videos in particular, I have a voiceover. I film it slow. It's me doing it because there is a lot of intention that goes into the motions, and it isn't just like swinging your joint around. But
Yeah.
I would say that the hip one is probably the hardest for everyone. And it's not that fun, but you can do it from a standing position. You can do all of these from different positions and challenge them in different ways. But yeah, I don't go too wildly deep into FR, but I do think that a lot of benefit comes from just understanding how to isolate and articulate each of your joints from an intrapersonal relationship. And when you had mentioned earlier, like what is the big aha moments that clients have?
Yeah.
I've been pretty astounded that how like the car and joint routine is like a tiny footnote in the training that I do with people. But so many people are like, oh my gosh, I started doing my cars and it's like,
Yeah.
And so, and that was just like, okay, you don't know what you don't know. You don't move what you don't know. And you started moving something and you know what? It started feeling better. So,
yeah. So interesting. And you see like where we're headed, the state of like, I don't want to call it like humanity is such a big word, but if there's some principles or ideas you could just like a microchip just install in every human, what would that like principle or idea be that would just like elevate how we move, how we feel, how we just are humans?
Sorry, my kid just popped in over here and I was looking at him instead of you. If you
let him pop in.
Oh no, it's good. If you rephrase the question one more time for me there.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, like the state of how we move, how we live our lives today. You know where it's headed, where it's going. It's more sedentary, it's less movement, and you mentioned it before, we don't need to walk anymore. We can take our kick bikes, electric scooters, cars, order Uber Eats or whatever. So if we could just like elevate humanity, what principles or ideas, if you could install it in us, in everyone,
and
what would that be?
So I think this is such a fun question in a couple of ways, and it leads me to a couple thoughts that I've had over the past few months. This is partly the problem that we are actually facing right now. This question, like the idea of this question, is actually part of the problem we are facing, where people are having false arrivals without actually journeying, without actually going on, walking the path. And I like to illustrate that with social media. You'll have an influencer or somebody spew a list of buzzwords, things, biohacks, resources, and then somebody else just kind of reads those and adopts them as their own, but they didn't really come to those understandings or conclusions with anything that really meant anything in their life. So they're very superficial. So while I get where the question is, I think it's worth kind of going down this brief tangent of part of it is doing the thing, like struggling with the thing, being on the journey, and that really allows us to even get to the headspace in the first place. And it's like, and I think that the journey is so vital, and that destinations don't even really exist, or the value of a destination can't be grasped without the journey, if that makes sense. And so that doesn't necessarily answer your question there, but it just speaks to how important doing the thing is sometimes.
But on what you're saying, I'm also thinking like you have so much more experience. You have done the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So you are basically like standing on the top of the mountain, and you could look down on me and see, okay, Morgan, don't go that path because you'll wind up dead or you'll injure yourself. So if you can take this path, this is how we like learn tribally.
Totally.
Learn from our society, from books, like where people who have done something for decades, they can like compact that into a book, and we can learn that in 10 days or in 10 hours of reading it. And we can, so we are also like social creatures where we learn from each other's mistakes.
Yeah, where we can journey together.
Yeah, we can journey together.
Yep, and then help people avoid the same mistakes and pitfalls and things that we did. So totally, and that's where I view myself.
But we also have like that, like we are forwarding our knowledge to our kids, to our community, or if they're coming like new community members, if we're talking about like tribal societies. So that passing of information is inherent in us. That is what I believe, or what I see in nature and in what do you call it, like indigenous people. So we like that is installed within us. Yeah,
and I totally agree. And that's how I view myself, like as a parent and a coach. And like you said, is like the idea is that we can pass on better. But similarly, like with my child, that still means he still needs to walk the path. But like you said, you can help them get to the right path rather than like accidentally going this way or, falling off the cliff.
I still have to climb the mountain while you're standing there coaching me and guiding me,
Totally.
Of course.
Yeah.
I need to take the journey. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, but you could help somebody take the right path. And so it's a big question. So I guess your question is if there is some, so rather than instill a thing, it's like would your question be if there was a path that people could go down? I guess I'm trying to refine it to a more...
Yeah. Like so I'm thinking about myself, how would I answer that question? So if I could prescribe humanity anything, that would be just like more time in nature. Like instead of 9 hours in front of a screen, let's get 9 hours just
I guess here's a way that I could...
in contact with nature, barefoot, or just like in contact with what's real.
Okay, I've got an answer for you. I think, and I agree with what you just said, and I think that the reason why I won't say that answer is because I think it's pretty well understood now that, getting sun, getting grounded, feet on the earth, working out, these are all very important things. But I think to where we are now in humanity, the thing that I would say isn't related to fitness inherently, but it would be to start intentionally being part of the process of the aspects and pieces of your life that you consume.
How do you
so like start being part of the food processes, start being part of making things that you like, tools that you use, things in your home. And it doesn't mean like, never buying anything and making everything for yourself. But even in the same way that I have, had the idea that I worked as a server for a while, and kind of coming back to the physical empathy thing, it's like if you worked as a server in a restaurant and then now you are a patron at restaurants, you can kind of feel what the server's feeling and kind of empathetically like be like, okay, this is a hard job, I understand it, or whatever, like anything like that. It gives you a little bit of an in. But why I think that this is a good answer to this question is, as we have removed ourselves from the process of everything, because everything around us is made by somebody or something. Like, these are real natural resources. These are real things. These are even synthetic things. Like, things are made by somebody. And one of the things that our child is wildly aware of is that everything is made. And part of that is because, like I mentioned before we jumped on the podcast, like I work leather, I work with steel and welding and woodworking. And my wife does a lot of textile things, fermentation, ceramics, darning, knitting, stained glass. And so we make and do a lot of crafts and things. But I think one of the things that is so missing in today's day and age is that people don't even know that things are made, that things can be made, how things are made. And so my 3-year-old is always asking, is like, who made that? Or like, how do you do, because we make so many things. And so, and some of the times we're like, yeah, that did, that came from Amazon. Like, cause it did. Yeah. And he's like, well, like, where, like, and then he asks bigger questions of like, and he wants to know about the delivery man that's dropping off the thing. And so he's engaged with like, what goes into making something a thing. And as we, bring things back more locally, and again, this isn't like to be dogmatic about like only buy expensive local things or don't do that, but it's like, just understand it. It's like everything is made. And I think as we start to make things ourselves and have a deeper appreciation for the time and effort that goes into even, like making your awesome vest there, like then we start to kind of slow down, have a deeper appreciation, a bigger empathy for the people in our community and in our world. And I think that starts to sort a lot of the issues that we have today in modernity, is that we forget that they're like that, on the other end of our social media posts, these are real people, these are, and it just kind of, I think it grounds us and connects us to value and identity a little bit more as we become participants in our life. And in the same way that I believe physical practice is like, now you are participating in your physical journey more actively. You're a driver, not just a participant, and things are happening to you. And I think if you don't have a physical practice, you become kind of that victim. Like, things happen to you. You're not living in your life. You're not comfortable in your own skin. And similarly, if you don't know how things are made, you don't know how to cook, you don't know how to grow food, like all of these things, it's not that you need to do all those, and specialists are still important. And we want to, like my wife right now bakes sourdough bread for the local community, so like people can take orders from her. And it's like, they don't want to bake the bread, but I think they should kind of know how and know that somebody's doing it, know who's on the other end of making that bread. And then it makes the bread more special. And then they're actually paying somebody in their community. And then it adds an intrinsic integration of value that I think is largely stripped from modernity. And so I think, to answer your question, if I could inject one thing, I would say that people should take a little bit of time to come back to being makers. And even if it's just for a season, or even just pondering like, wow, everything is made by somebody, and everything is valuable.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I love this answer because that is my journey from living in Stockholm, being a city boy, raised in the suburbs, to moving to the countryside up north in Sweden, and getting a hunting license, starting hunting, got some sheep, got some chickens, got some animals, bought a farm, like from the city straight to the farm.
That's awesome.
It was like a wild ride, and learning everything. And connecting with the local farmers, going and butchering together with them, because I bought a sheep from someone, but I asked them, can I come and butcher the animal together and see how it's done? Man, it's tough work. It's not easy, but it gives you such a sense of like, I feel that I'm capable. I feel some form of like primal force taking over. Like the first time I took a deer, no, not a deer, it's an elk, a Swedish
Mhm.
elk, with the hunting team, and we started to cut it up and taking off the skin. It was just like, it felt a little bit morbid in the beginning, or I didn't know what the feeling was, but it was like I was so present, and then it just like primal, and it was just instincts after that.
Mhm.
It's so I really appreciate and love that answer. Not the easiest thing to do when everything is so convenient and you got Amazon and Uber Eats and whatever, but
Well,
if you can
just to
get, yeah,
just to drop into the morbid thing, and I think it's interesting too, where it's like, okay, because we are so removed from death and the
true,
processing of food, it's like totally, it's like, okay, we're peeling the skin off, we're gutting it, we're chopping up this animal that was just alive, because we're so 180 degrees from where everything was for
yes,
it's. But if you flip the script a little bit and you think about going to a grocery store as if, okay, like let's think about this as somebody that has never done this. So to get my food, I'm going to walk into this big brick or enclosed building that has, forced air. It's not even air from outside. There's no sunshine in here. We have electricity running so we can see things. And then there are these, animals that have been killed and have been processed, but they're already chopped up in little plastic bags. Like that's such a weird, bizarre decoupling of where it came from, what's happening. But that's what's been normalized, is to not think about any of the life force, any of the power, any of the beauty, any of that, and to just like get that arrival. And I guess that's another example of like not journeying and arriving. As we are,
yeah, okay, yeah, it's getting clearer what you
yeah,
meant with journeying and arrival.
because
Yeah,
as we're just eating food all the time and consuming food, but we didn't journey for the food, it like there's almost a sickness like that comes from it, and that is where I believe we are, like culturally, is like we are arriving so often without journeying, and it's like it's warping our sense of reality in a very bizarre way.
I'm sensing that we could unpack so many things and go into so many directions. So and the time is just like running out, but I just want to touch this thing like before just times blows out. And that is, what do you think about like building community, like permaculture community, or just living in a form of community? Because I don't know if this is just Sweden, but the country here has the most amount of single households, like where people are like living just by themselves,
Hmm.
the most single apartments per capita in the world. We have, I think, the world's most leading cause of death is suicide, or the most people where they commit suicides is in Sweden.
Wow.
So we have like so many bad statistics. We have some good, but not when it comes to mental health and living a great life.
Mhm.
So, and I hear this a lot from friends that are a little bit open, a little bit alternative. They want to live in community. They want to create some form of community, but the transition is a real hard step. And I felt that for myself as well. We
Mhm.
are like encouraging people to connect, to come to our space, trying to create something with other people, but it's not maybe the right opportunity, or the finances aren't there always, or we don't find the right land or project, or
Mhm.
and some community projects they don't succeed. They gets a lot of drama and egos are involved. And
Yeah,
can
yeah,
you
no,
just share your thoughts?
yeah. I think about this a lot, especially now. Like I've always thought about this a lot, but especially now having a family and children, obviously it becomes so much more relevant. But I believe that there's something at play where we have polarized so many things to the detriment of everybody. And I'll kind of dip back from community to physical practice for a second here, if I can kind of maintain
Yeah.
my thought pattern, where there people think that there is kind of all or nothing, where they're like, okay, I have a great physical practice, I'm a fitness person on this end, and then over here, I'm not a fitness person, I'm just an intellectual or something. Well, actually, everyone has a physical practice. You might just have a really shitty physical practice. It's so bad that you don't even know that you have it, and you're just like an alien in your own body. So back to the community. We all actually live in communities. They just suck.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea where it's like, okay, well, I want a community. I want to build this community. And then people are like, no, that's hippie. No, that's, communist. No, that won't work. And no, there'll be falling outs. It's like, why is that the only alternative of community? It's like, okay, I live in a small town of 1,000 people, very rurally. I have a neighbor right over here. I have a neighbor right over here, here. I live in a community. Like, it is a community, but it's not a very community that participates in the way that I feel we should, or historically or ancestrally we did. So it's not supporting the needs that we have. So for me, where I think this should go naturally is where you're electing your neighbors, where you're being intentional. Like, it comes, for me, a lot of this comes back to integration and intention, where it's like, I'm going to live somewhere no matter what. I'm going to have neighbors, whether the closest neighbor is 50 miles or the closest neighbor is a shared wall in an apartment building. It's going to happen. So why shouldn't I be intentional about where I live and who my neighbors are? That just makes common sense. So obviously the big hurdle that you mentioned is people are generally geographically tied to their like income. And so they are limited in their mobility and ability to choose where they are, outside of maybe just being afraid of trying something new or moving somewhere. But even if you had, let's say, the 10 families that you really wanted to just be neighbors with, most of them don't have the freedom to just pick up and leave. So I have plans and ideas of how to kind of bridge that gap for people. But what I've envisioned as my trajectory is, down the road having my own ranch. But then if I have adjacent property that I own and I can subdivide into separate plots of land, and then have people that I meet, that I know, that apply to actually buy the land near me as a neighbor. And then there can be some sort of financing where it's like, let's say they're renting to own the neighboring property, and all sorts of interesting finances could come in where they're not actually accruing, all the money goes to principal, rather than like the mortgage that I'm paying, where it's like 10% maybe goes to principal and the rest goes to interest. And so you can do ways where you're not extorting them, they're actually purchasing the property. Now you have neighbors that have shared values, that have kids that can grow up together, peers for me as a man, peers for my wife. And then you start to exponentially increase the value proposition for living and for life. And yeah, you can have shared resources. Like, let's say I have a huge wood shop and you want to build something, we can build it in my shop. It doesn't mean it needs to be like communal space where nobody knows whose is what. In the same way that I still do that, where I live here in a small town and I needed to pick up a bunch of lumber for the fence that I was building. My buddy has a huge flatbed trailer and a truck, and I just went and picked that up. The keys were in there, drove over, picked it up, and we share resources. This is what rural countries have always done, even in modern day. And so I think that where people hit a wall initially is there's this polarizing idea that has been sold about like hippie communes, where it's like, no, I just want a good community where I can trust my neighbors. We have shared values. We want food that's not poisonous, and we like can do and have beautiful things. So I don't know if that's kind of a rant.
Yeah. And just quick on the values. What are some of the values you would like to share with your closest neighbors in a community like that?
Yeah, I think the big ones for me is stressing quality of things. So, and the big one, the hardest one that I find is the quality of food, for example. Because when you get together with family or you get together at like functions and communities and spaces, generally, and maybe I'm just speaking for the States, but everything, like the spread is poison. Like we're talking, It's all chemicals, it's dyes, it's, trash food that is and in the lowest form, where it's like, I want to engage, I want to be part of community, but you're literally poisoning your children with king size candy bars and they're, 1 year old. And
Yeah.
it's like, I just like, I can't endorse that. And then, and I can't really participate in that in a meaningful way that isn't sabotaging and destroying my own values and the future of my children. And then outside of that, I think kind of values around being biologically and ancestrally consistent, again, with our health. It's like not doing something that tears apart what I'm working towards, but builds it up in the way that we were talking about, wanting to evolve into grandparents that can push our children and our grandchildren physically. That starts with having positive relationships with the men and the women in our lives. And so even if you're in a circle, a social setting where two men are energetically engaging and they're tearing down the women in their lives, like, I don't want to participate in that. I don't want to prop up things that don't support, what I view to be like healthy intra and interpersonal relationships. And so, yeah, it's a kind of a, not to go down every single one. I think it's just like kind of living integrated, being holistic. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome answer. I'm with you there. And is there anything we haven't talked about that you feel is burning in you that we should mention?
I wouldn't say anything rises to that level of urgency, but like you said, I feel like, there's a million tangents and things that are just great and we could talk on. Yeah. And I would just stress people to kind of view themselves as generalists, as humans that are capable of a wide array of things, of thinking about a wide array of things. And just because you think it doesn't mean that you're a good or bad person, or you need to identify with the thoughts that flow through your head. And to not take ourselves so seriously.
Awesome. So we'll end on that note. And where can people find you if they find you to be inspiring, interesting, or they want to take part of your content?
Yeah, I think the best place to get in contact with me is on my Instagram. It's just humanwild.co. And I really encourage people to just directly message me and start having a real conversation about your physical practice or life in general. There's so many things that I overlap with people on. And I think that's really like, I'm on there for the real conversations. And so I just encourage people to reach out to me directly and we could just start talking about training and stuff. But if you don't, feel comfortable and want to reach out to me directly like that, definitely follow, see what's on there. Like 0.5% of things that I do make their way actually to social media, because I really try and live my life very much off of it and not put a lens between me and what's happening in my life. With still trying to put out some helpful things. But on the other side, if on my Instagram, if you click the start now, there's a free resource that people can log into where I break down 2 of my initial standards. People can kind of test for themselves, start getting kind of a flavor of that. And then that free resource for the children is also going to be on there too. So just the start here, and it's just, you put in your email and I can send you the login information for it, and people can jump in there and start for free.
All right. Awesome. So we'll share that in the show notes. So Instagram, press the link and you're good to go. So thank you so much, Loren, for your insights, and what a true, like, even more inspirational after talking to you than just looking at your inspiring Instagram, which I encourage people to do. Just like check it out. It's it makes you think. It makes you think because it's not the mainstream.
And I've been on there for a while, so do take time, go back a long ways. There's like 1,500 posts of things from way back when. So there's some fun stuff to dig up on there.
All right, cool. Thanks
Awesome.
a lot, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan.
Thanks. Bye-bye.